Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 11 o'clock session. This will be our last content session today before lunch. I'm very, very excited about this particular one because for the first time this year, we have had technology sessions. We had 2 technology sessions yesterday, one about data analytics and next generation usage of that. We also had a sponsor that was hosted by Georgia Tech. And then we also had a roundtable session from the Technology Association of Georgia yesterday about operational visibility and technology supporting that. And this is our capstone technology session, the stuff that's changing our world, changing our personal worlds for sure, but also is going to disrupt over time, short and long term, the logistics industry and how we deliver, how we receive inbound and deliver outbound. I'm very excited for this panel today. And I'm going to introduce Manny Secura, who's going to introduce our panelists here with us today. Manny is a former professional transforming that little supply chain of Coca-Cola, and did some great things there. And his insights are going to be tremendous for this panel, as he's been working with supply chain and business transformations with major companies all over the world. So, Manny, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ginny. And welcome, everyone, to the session. In 1995, the Atlanta Braves won the World Series, not too far from here, the old Fulton County Stadium. In the same year, Clayton Christensen coined the term disruptive innovation. He's now a professor at Harvard Business School. And he defined innovative or disruptive innovation or disruptive technologies as innovations or technologies that create new markets by applying different set of values, which ultimately overtakes an existing market. Okay, as an example, you know, back in the 1600s, steam-powered vehicles was developed, but it took another 200 years before we saw a gas-powered motor vehicle. But it took Henry Ford to come along with his Model T to make the car accessible and affordable, and that completely changed the way we move people and products around. Fast forward 100 years, and here we are in the hub of logistics in the world, in Georgia, and at this great summit. So with that, I have the privilege of introducing to all of you 4 great disruptors up here on the stage. Hope these chairs don't disrupt too much at the side. And I encourage you to use those apps to look at their bios. They're going to be telling you a little bit more about themselves. But so without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all from left to right. Stephen Boswell, he's a senior application sales executive for the Internet of Things at AT&T. Next we have Ryan Morel. He's general manager of market development at Flexe. Next we have Lawrence Corban. He's a mechanical designer. He's a philanthropist and an entrepreneur at Guided Systems Technologies. And finally, we have Marc Gorlin. He's the founder and CEO at Roadie. So with that, I'd like to start with Stephen. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what's new and next at AT&T.
Yeah, great. No, thank you, Manny. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this morning. So a little bit, and I think everyone in here knows AT&T and probably for various different types of business functionality. But what I want to really concentrate today for the purposes of this discussion is where AT&T is have a leadership position in what we call the Internet of Things. And IoT, Internet of Things, gets thrown around quite a bit. And just to kind of break it down, and then I'm going to apply it to logistics and supply chain, but it really at the heart is taking IoT and taking humans, personnel, connecting you with external devices in the field and being able to get real-time visibility via connection of those devices into the most critical data that's meaningful for your operations. You can look at it from a consumer perspective. I think we've all seen the proliferation in the home, whether you're monitoring your lighting, whether it's your wearables. It's proliferating into our consumer automobile cars, where AT&T actually has a role in connecting the vehicle in terms of Wi-Fi capabilities, et cetera. But if you apply that concept to logistics and supply chain, AT&T, for example, is obviously from a vehicle tracking perspective. We track roughly about 2 million fleet vehicles today. From a shipping container perspective, we monitor and track around 280,000 containers globally. And we do that through a variety of different methodologies, but essentially what we're doing is, even if you take it down to the actual shipment level and leveraging devices that are cellular enabled, but also use other types of communication like Bluetooth, et cetera, and using those devices to get real-time visibility on information that normally has to be done through a manual process. So for example, think about being able to track your most critical shipments as they're on the move and understanding when they've left a location, when they've arrived at a location, when they're overdue. The ability to have anti-theft type of functionality. So think about a sensor inside of the shipment that it gets exposed to light. So when the box is opened, not only are you getting anti-theft type of alerts, but also you can look at it as a POD, above and beyond a written type of proof of delivery. You know exactly when the box is being opened and it's unloaded, or it's going on to the next part of its supply chain process. Think about even heavy equipment, for example. If you have a mixed fleet of cranes, bulldozers, whatever it may be in your operational part of your business, and what may require manual work orders or to take on different types of information off those types of assets, the ability to use devices to collect that in real time, to know everything from engine hours, when it's idle, when it's running, and take that information to create preventative work orders or integrate those into your back-end system. So really, at the core, driving operational efficiencies, lowering your costs for monitoring your most critical assets in your logistics and supply chain. And then lastly, and I'll turn it to my colleagues, is if you look at dry containers over the road, the ability to know when the trailer's been attached or detached from the cab, knowing when it's backing into the back of a bay, and having sensors to give you that kind of real-time visibility. So, with that, AT&T has, got a 26 million connected device environment, and that's through a plethora of different devices and technologies that we leverage, again, to give the end user and our customers real-time visibility into that most critical data.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So Flexe, if you've heard of us, we refer to ourselves as the marketplace for warehouse space. We've been called the Airbnb of warehouse space, which is an imperfect but it works analogy. AWS for warehouse space is maybe a little bit better. So it's a really simple concept and model that we enable companies who have excess warehouse capacity for a variety of reasons to connect and transact efficiently with people who need additional warehouse space. So that manifests itself in two different ways. So one of which is we provide effectively a listing service and marketplace so that you can find the type of space that you need or find the type of customers who match with you. And the second set is a set of technology tools that enable you to transact. So scheduling shipments, scheduling deliveries, identifying which SKUs you're going to have in storage, et cetera, and then picking them back up, right? So from our perspective, we started, in tech, as we often do, we start with an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. And we started with just the overflow scenario. So pallet in, pallet out of, hey, I got too much stuff and I need somewhere to put it. So that was the first thing we did, and it tends to be our most common use case for now. The number of pallets has grown from the beginning, which we were maybe doing 5 or 10. Now we're in the thousands on an individual customer basis. But we constantly see issues, and I think all of you have probably seen issues where you have just way too much stuff for the amount of space that you have to put it. And your options have historically been to go out and take down a lease, negotiate with a 3PL, or get on the phone and try to find somebody who can take your pallets. And so we offer a really simple way for you to do that. The second scenario that people use us, the opposite side of that coin is the supply side. So as I said, people just having excess space because their peak seasons are fall and spring, for example, and so we enable them to find people who need space because they're building for Q4 or building for summer. And the second, as we've grown and as our technology has gotten better, it starts to enable us to do some more interesting things, right? So over the last 6 months, we've started deploying solutions which are effectively light fulfillment in case pick operations. So now instead of just pallet in, pallet out, we're doing pallet in and cases out. Probably within the next 6 months, we'll be talking about pallet in and individual eaches out. And for our customers, this is a huge change for them and a really fantastic benefit because it enables them to put product in market where they couldn't previously do it without massive capital investments or commitments, right? So unlikely that 3PLs or any regional logistics provider is going to give you the opportunity to come in and try something for 3 to 6 months. With Flex and a no commitment model with warehouses, you can come in, test a new market, and decide if you want to scale and how you want to handle that. And the last scenario that people use us for is companies that are growing really fast and can't accurately predict what their next 3 to 5 years are going to look like, let alone maybe their next year. So we have companies who come to us and say, gosh, we don't know what's going to happen here, and we don't want to get a lease that's going to be too small a year from now. Or work with a 3PL who might not be as dynamic as we'd like them to be. How can you help us? So from a technology perspective, I think as everybody here will talk about, and we really believe wholeheartedly, is that the really big benefit of technology is being able to apply all of the capital investments made by everyone in this room and all across the country to be used by third parties and to transact efficiently and quickly, right? And there's no reason that any of you shouldn't be able to work with the guy sitting next to you via API or any other technical method.
Great, thank you. Lawrence?
So I'm with a company here in Georgia, a small company, and we design, build, and operate drones for all sorts of different applications. And so since this is a logistics conference, I'm mainly here to talk to you about everyone's favorite subject, which is drone delivery, right? I'm sure just about everyone in this room has heard of Amazon Prime Air. And so you probably won't be surprised when I tell you that I think that drone delivery will probably be one of the most important technological advancements of the 21st century and will change the world as we know it forever for the better. But it won't be because Amazon can deliver everything to consumers just a little bit faster than UPS can already do it today. It will be because it enables developing countries to leapfrog over decades of infrastructure development to deliver to their impoverished peoples just a few things a whole lot faster than a donkey or a bicycle can. And so the important thing that you have to understand about drones and drone delivery is that the technology already exists, and it's existed for quite some time, decades. And you can already make the technology really, really, really cheap. The main reason why you haven't seen drones or drone delivery proliferate throughout the first world is mainly because they threaten the safety of our mass air transit industries, our national airspace. Nobody wants to be on the plane when a drone gets sucked into the jet engine, right? So the regulatory barriers for integrating drones into, airspace in major countries like the United States are massive. And case in point, Amazon last year spent close to $10 million lobbying Congress just so that they can continue to do what are fairly menial drone tests. And to me, that's really the sad part of this story, and it's probably a little further out than than a lot of the technologies that we're talking about today. But, it's the sad part of the story to me because I know that with $10 million, innovative logistics companies could take existing drone technology and immediately go out and start delivering thousands and thousands of pounds of cargo, life-saving cargo, to suffering people in places like Africa. Places like Africa where the regulatory barriers to entry are nowhere near as severe as they are here in the U.S. Places like Africa where the opportunity to profit from delivering cargo to those people, to better their lives and to even save their lives in many cases, is enormous, more so than ever before. And places like Africa where the lessons that you're going to learn about drone delivery from testing are probably the same lessons, if not more profound lessons that you would learn from doing that same testing here in the United States. So if you're a logistics company and you're thinking about drone delivery, especially if you're thinking about investing in drone delivery or how in the future you will be able to utilize drone technology to improve your bottom line and that sort of thing, remember that every day more than 1 billion people live without access to modern all-season road systems. And what that amounts to is more than 1 billion people who have a real problem to solve, and that drone delivery is the solution. Whereas, here in the United States, there's not really, drone delivery doesn't really solve a problem. It's proven that if you can get things faster, you'll buy more stuff. And that's really the main reason why I think Amazon is working so much on drone delivery. It's not because they want to make a lot of money doing drone deliveries, because they know people will buy more of their stuff if they can get it faster. So the question that I think the logistics industry needs to ask and answer when it comes to drone delivery is which offers the stronger value proposition? Drone delivery for the rich or drone delivery for the poor? And I think there's a case to be made for drone delivery being the business model for drone delivery in the third world may actually turn out to be more profitable, or not necessarily more profitable, but better than in the first world, at least for now. And so I know that's probably a little bit ideological, but drone delivery is still it's a new technology, and everybody's trying to figure out what do we do with drone technology, right, and delivery drones and that sort of thing. And the answer is, you have to really start thinking outside of the box, because it's very difficult to get a drone to build a system of drones that can deliver cargo more efficiently and cost effectively than a truck on a highway when you have the highway. So something to think about.
Great. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. Marc?
That was like one of the best descriptions of how drones could be useful versus all the hand waving that you usually see. I mean, it's one of the few Georgia natives probably left in the room. We shoot those out of the sky for sport. So it definitely seems to make more sense in some of the third world countries. So my name is Marc, and I started a company called Roadie. And what Roadie is, I think what probably is best, because we all will think of how we could use something like this. I'll tell you why I started in the first place. And like all companies, they usually come from a single problem that you have. So I have a condo down in Perdido Key, Florida, and found out a developer didn't put pans underneath a master bathroom shower. Leaked into somebody's 6 different units. So you have to replace it, decide to make it nicer, and put tile up just to make it a little nicer. So I'm driving down there. I get to Montgomery, Alabama on a Thursday in February. And I have lunch, get back in my truck, and I'm ready to take the rest of the 3-hour drive. And I get a call from Glenn, the tile guy. Now, Glenn's from LA, that's Lower Alabama. So he doesn't quite talk like the rest of us. And the call literally goes like this. He's like, hey, Marc, this is Glenn. That bullnose tile showed up broken as shit. Ain't going to be here till overnight delivery, which is on Monday. First of all, overnight delivery is Friday, not Monday, Glenn. But I knew I was not going to get very far with that line of thinking with Glenn. So I was like, where is this tile? He said, I think it's in Birmingham, about an hour and a half north of Montgomery. So I said, find out. I hang up. I'm sitting at the overpass of I-65 in Montgomery, Alabama. And I look left, and I see all these cars going south. And I look right, and I see all these cars going north. And I think to myself, you know, there's bound to be somebody leaving Birmingham right now heading to Montgomery. If I just knew who they were, surely they'd throw a box of tile in their trunk. They're coming this way anyway. I give them 20 bucks. There's probably someone leaving Birmingham right now going all the way down to Florida, and I can be 3 Coronas in by the time they get there. And then it just hit me that there's somebody leaving everywhere, going everywhere else all the time. This incredible, amazing transportation heat map that's made up of all the people and patterns and places that we all go every day. More on demand, more anytime than probably anything else out there, because we're going to work, we're taking the kids to school, we're going on vacation, we're just running errands. And you overlay those on top of each other, and people are going more places than probably UPS, FedEx, and the post office combined. The hard part is tying into it. And every time I tell that tile story, usually, y'all don't have microphones, so you can't do this, but somebody tells a tile story right back to me. Everybody has a tile story. You're probably thinking of one in your own heads right now. So that's what we're building on Roadie, is an on-the-way delivery network based on cars and trucks and box trucks that are already heading in the right direction. But it's very community-based as well, because your neighbor is actually helping you out. You're getting paid to do it, but you're helping a neighbor out. You're getting paid to be a good neighbor. You're saving on packaging supplies, because you don't need all those boxes, tape, and packing peanuts. And for a lot of bigger, oversized, longer haul items, it's pretty expensive to do that. We've set up places like Waffle House where you can meet up and meet with people that you don't necessarily want coming to your home to meet up for a package. And Waffle House is nice enough to give people the community a free waffle as well, so who doesn't want that? You get free roadside assistance. At the end of the year, you get a list of all the miles you drove anyway, and you can write them off on your taxes, on trips that you were already going to take anyway. So there's not a whole lot of reason not to do it, but we're essentially doing, I mean, I love, you know, you're talking about the granularity of devices, and we're devices and mobile apps that are actually trying to bring people together. So it's unlike Amazon that lets you sit at your kitchen table and order stuff in your underwear, and that's pretty awesome. And it's not like your bank that does everything that they can do on their mobile app to make sure you never walk into a store again. This is connecting real people at real places in the real world, helping each other out and giving your stuff a lift if you're heading in that direction anyway.
Great, thank you, Marc. And I'm going to stay with you and maybe work back around and ask you a question.
Sure.
So you're playing in a very competitive space. I mean, there are a lot of services out there. Uber's trying to do the same thing now. With how do you find yourself in your niche in your market? And this is a general question back to all of you. You know, you mentioned Airbnb. You know, I might have a great idea and say, okay, well, I'm not using half of my garage, so I'll just rent out half of my garage to someone out here. So likewise, you know, how are you competing with Amazon? You know, Internet of Things is such a generic term. What are you all doing in your space to drive change in that industry that you really believe in, that makes you get up in the morning, take that shower?
Well, there's a couple answers to that. The first is understanding the filter where we live and how it's different from everyone else out there. So you have the UPS and the FedExes, and a lot of people in here have forgotten more about logistics than I'll ever probably know. But essentially that hub and spoke system requires that delivery density of all the houses in the neighborhood and utilization of how much stuff you can put on a truck. Great. But then there's all the other people that Manny's talking about. So you have Uber Rush, you have Caviar, you have DoorDash, you have Postmates. I mean, the list is as long as my arm and legs and everybody up here. And that's great, but there's a simple filter that you can look at across those that makes them quite different. They are on demand. Take Uber, for example. Everybody here use Uber? Love it, great, love it too. Well, when it happens, when you push that button on your app, somebody's coming somewhere they were not already going, picking you up, taking you somewhere else that they were not already going. And it's awesome, it's great, use it. But there's a cost with that. Versus true point-to-point, or Roadie, which is somewhere in your general vicinity, is heading in the same direction. Your stuff just happens to need a lift. And as time and scale, that efficiency sucks a lot of cost out of the equation because you are going there anyway. Even more so on the places where we truly shine, which is these oversized, awkward, out-of-the-box items where the frictional cost of going a mile out of your way and taking something 200 miles down the road is amazing. The store. So you combine that piece, and the real differentiator is the community. And these are the stories that happen within the community where people are taking things back and forth. There was a couple of guys that were traveling through Texas, and they were picking up gigs to help pay for gas. So they stop at this house in Austin and only discover a dying grandmother and a grieving family. And they're so touched by the sadness that they see in this house, they ask if they can pray with the family before they get back on the road. And that's just what they did. 3 days later, they delivered the grandmother's stuff to her granddaughter in Bend, Oregon. FedEx doesn't have these stories. You don't pray with your postman. That doesn't happen. And all these things. We had like a bunk bed that was going from Cocoa Beach, Florida to Chicago 4 weeks ago. It was accepted in 15 minutes. If you get enough people, it's like trying to build eBay again. The more and more people you get in, everybody here takes out their phone. I know you're on the app giving us questions, but if you have an extra moment, you download Roadie. That's how you build the network more. It's almost like the human circulatory system. You've got to build that pressure and volume through it. And then all of a sudden, you've got this voluntary workforce that's literally surprisingly stable. I'll tell you one more story that makes it different that from all these other folks. So there was a guy, Will, and his fiancée, Sarah. And Sarah broke off the engagement with Will at the last minute. Will was very sad. He was a little bit pissed too. And Sarah wanted all of her stuff sent back to her, and she lived a couple states away. And he was looking at what it's going to cost to box and package all this stuff up and send it to her. So he literally roadied 3 trash bags of her shit to her 2 states away. I couldn't have made up this story if I tried when starting this company. And all of these stories and connections and meeting up with old fraternity brothers or old relatives are happening within this community. And that is the single biggest thing that makes it more powerful than everybody else out there. You don't pick your Uber driver, you pick your Roadie driver.
Thanks, Marc. Any other stories around? How about if I wanted to?
I don't got it. Don't call on me.
It's a tough act to follow.
But it's a tough act to follow. So I would say, marketplace businesses, which Marc operates and which we operate, are extremely complex, right? And they're complex from a sales and marketing perspective because there's two truisms in marketplaces. Like the first one to scale wins, and if you don't have liquidity, you lose, right? You're done. So the fact that Marc can have a Roadie accepted and driven somewhere within 15 minutes is fantastic, right? And because his business wouldn't exist without that sort of liquidity. From our perspective, because you started off talking about competition, I think as a provider to supply chains and logistics organizations, our goal is to help other people compete, right? And it's competing against each other, but really I think we are absolutely in the age of you need to figure out how you're going to compete with Amazon, right? And how are you going to compete with the customer expectations that they've set, and how are you going to make those apply those customer expectations within your own organization, right? Because the reality is that there's maybe one other company on the planet that can compete from a capital perspective with Amazon, and that's Walmart, right? And that's it. But if you pull all your capital together and look at your distribution networks across the country, you're probably quite a bit bigger and quite a bit better. So the goal of companies like ours, and I think companies like what all of us are trying to do, is help you find those connection points so that you can take advantage of those investments already made. So, sure, we're going to compete against people who are doing something similar to us. We're going to compete against 3PLs, but those are minor. Those are minor in comparison to like the entire market competing against Amazon or Walmart, I think.
Well, you guys are also competing in a different market. You're making these technologies more accessible to clients and customers and that can't afford a 3PL, for example.
Yep.
So I think turning it around and maybe looking at Internet of Things. How do you use the technology that's out there in the community to scale up to make a Roadie and a Flexe and drones more useful, let's say, to enterprises?
Well, I mean, I could just comment on AT&T's approach and how we've worked with a variety of customers in the logistics and supply chain space, again, whether it's freight forwarders, 3PLs, et cetera. But we kind of act as that integrator role, because a lot of times, as of just of last year, it's probably around an 80%, a little bit higher clip, that organizations across the board are looking about, how do I implement an IoT strategy? And where do I go about obtaining devices? How do I leverage connectivity? What about an application to support all this infrastructure? Who do I entertain to kind of piece together this type of solution, where AT&T is that integrator approach, where it's kind of, you can come to AT&T, we can only give you that entry point into not only developing perhaps your own application, but also giving you a packaged solution so that you can get to market quicker, as well as lower the operational costs or point of entry into developing an IoT strategy. And you can look at it from two different ways. In my first example, it was all about an organization leveraging devices for internal data consumption. So kind of think about it as internal auditing, if you will. My own assets, how are they performing? What type of data that I would like to collect off that asset remotely that could help my operations. But there's also the other side of this, is where you can leverage IoT or Internet of Things as more of a value add to your downstream market. So think about taking solutions that leverage Internet of Things type of architecture and creating a value add. So whether it's offering a near-time, real-time in-transit visibility solution for their most critical shipments. So think about, again, the ability to have an asset tracker placed into a crate, a pallet, and selling that into the market space. The ability, if you own dry trailers or chassis, the ability to couple that with a solution to sell to your customer base. The fact that they, again, know any given time, whether it's left a location, whether it's idle, whether it's started a trip, ended a trip, and taking that service and bundling into what you already offer is an additional value add. So that's kind of where I see, in terms of its scaling, where I see the organizations starting to look about, how do I implement IoT? Which way do I go? Is it for internal or more as a value add? And as it's growing, you're seeing, again, the proliferation of devices, where devices now are out there that you can deploy them and they have 10-year battery life. There's the concept of disposable devices. So if I put an asset tracker with a particular piece of equipment, when I'm done with it, I dispose of it, and you see these costs coming down. So that's where I kind of really see the evolution going as well.
Good. Okay. You guys want to add anything else? I'm going to take a couple of questions that came from the audience, and there are a couple of questions aimed at you, Marc. But I'm going to ask the questions because I think they tie in with a more general concern around security and compliance and stuff. So Marc, how would you handle the risk of drug cartels leveraging unknown drivers to move drugs? That's the first question. Second question, kind of related.
I have short remember. Can I just do one at a time?
How does Roadie prevent stolen packages and goods? So they're kind of related questions. So I'm going to ask you those questions, but get you guys also to think in terms of security. You touched on, the FAA regulations, but there are bigger issues around, drones flying in terms of privacy and all that stuff. And the same deal with, me renting out trunk space in my car. How safe is that? So back to you, Marc.
Back to me in the
how do you prevent me from moving drugs to my dealer?
How do you do it currently?
I'm asking for a friend.
Well, that's why we have our subsidiary, drugmule.com, where the margins are much, much higher. It's a very, very, very common question, and it's an open box policy. It's an open picture policy. It's a part of things fitting in people's vehicles. Certain things are going to fit in my Expedition that aren't going to fit in someone's Prius. So you take pictures of what the items are before they actually are shipped. You also, when the driver gets there, they have the ability to decline or not to take whatever the item is. However, if someone's very, shady and stuffs a bunch of pot in a teddy bear, and sends it. We've got more deterministic tracking of both the item and who the players are on both sides than probably almost any other shipping company, because we have all the driver's license information on the driver, where they signed up, what their bank account is, what their insurance is, what kind of car they have, and on the sender. You can't just drop it off the post office. We actually know who these people are because they're part of a community. They're not just dropping off one-way packages. That said, if there was those problems, we have all that data that we could go and back the Roadie 100% if there was a problem. The quick answer on the security question is that it's a few things. One, every package that goes through Roadie is insured up to $500, which is 5 times more than the common carriers. UPS is also an investor in us, and also provide us through their UPS Capital insurance. So you can take it up to $10,000 of security, and you have the exact same insurance protection as if you just shipped it through UPS themselves. And the lastly is the tracking. When you come to pick up my stuff, I can watch you go down the road and know when you're getting there. So, unlike, your Comcast service where you're going to wait 12 hours on someone to show up, you actually know when they're going to show up. You can communicate with them, and you're not waiting around. So that's hopefully answers those two questions.
So when you talk about drones and drone delivery, there's a lot of practical problems that the popular culture solutions don't solve. One of them is theft, right? So in a lot of commercials that you've seen for drone delivery, you probably see the drone landing in the yard and then somebody coming out and picking up the package, right? Well, why can't they just pick up the drone and take it in the house with them, right? So there's tons of those practical problems with regard to drone delivery, but the biggest problem with drone delivery and safety is with the FAA. So you can't, before 2015, you couldn't legally, or I don't know if you can really say legally, but you were restricted from flying any unmanned aircraft for commercial purposes. And just since 2015, they've really opened up the floodgates, and they've started to allow people to actually fly drones for money. But with drone delivery, you can't go beyond line of sight yet. So with drone delivery, there's no reason for you to deliver a package next door, right? You just walk over there and hand it to them. So when you think about drone delivery, one of the biggest hurdles has to do with safety, and no one really knows how long it will take for the FAA to really start allowing drones in the United States to deliver things further than you can see them. So the rule is that if you can't see it with your eyeballs and you can't see other aircraft in the area, then you can't fly it. And that's where a lot of that $10 million that Amazon lobbied last year probably went, was to allowing them to begin doing beyond line of sight flights and things like that. So when you think about drone delivery, you got to think about it from the practical perspective. And there are solutions to all the problems, and they will eventually be solved. But until you have the FAA really open up the floodgates on people being able to fly beyond line of sight, then you're not going to see drone delivery proliferate at all, because it's impractical.
Do you guys want to add anything around security and?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a little bit different, because up front for us, we do a substantial amount of vetting of all of our supply side partners, and they tell us all about their facilities, provide pictures, et cetera. The question for us is more around what happens if something happens to my product? Who's responsible for that? And with us, it's no different than it would be with any other logistics provider. So whoever's holding the product is responsible for them. So all of our warehouse partners agree to that and hold insurance, and then we also carry additional insurance as needed.
Yeah, I was thinking, obviously, as you can imagine, with AT&T, security is and one of the utmost questions, and certainly we get when we work with customers in terms of solutioning an Internet of Things type of deployment. So we look at it from a couple of different ways, but mainly, obviously, you want to preserve the integrity of the data. If you're transmitting data across the internet, obviously you want to make that secure. You don't want the data going across the public internet and going out to data centers without any protection or security wrapper around that. You look at it from the device level. So for example, we have devices that monitor shipments that board aircraft. Obviously with a lithium-ion battery, and probably folks have seen that in the news, that there's certain from the MDSS that you have to make sure that the lithium-ion battery comes under a certain level to make it safe to board flight. So we take those kinds of things into consideration when you're using types of cellular-based devices. So, but again, in terms of an architecture, that's of the utmost importance to us, that when you're going to actually have data traverse the internet, that we have the right protocols in place to monitor that and make sure that it's the integrity is preserved for that.
Good. I'm going to. I've got a couple of questions here from the audience, specifically Roadie and Flexe. I'm going to try and frame it up in terms of, given where you are today, and looking forward to the future in terms of how else you could apply these technologies. Specifically, the questions I have here from the audience for Marc. Do you see someone like UPS or other partners partnering with you to do kind of last mile delivery? That's one question. The other question, I think, to Lawrence, is would there be other applications for drones, for example, within yards and warehouses to move goods around? Okay, so I'll leave it with you guys.
Yeah, so there are definitely lots of applications for drones outside of delivery. One that comes to the top of my head immediately is port activity. So with the port, there's lots of things that go on where you need to monitor what's going on, you need to measure what's going on, you need to do all those sorts of things, and you have to do it manually now, or there's gaps in what you can do. So we're working with the Port of Houston to deliver solutions that solve problems like, it's just looking at the air conditioners on the roofs of all the buildings throughout the port, and doing the square footage of all the roofs on all the things, and then there's more, when you get to the waterways and all that type of stuff, measuring the sediment buildups and all this type of stuff throughout ports. So yeah, absolutely, there's tons of applications, and you could even go all the way down to putting drones indoors and flying them through warehouses and doing inventory type stuff or moving things around. And I mean, there's lots of different ways to apply them. The question is which ways are really practical and which ways aren't, right? So that's always the most difficult question. Everybody wants to use them for something, but nobody really knows what.
Your question was around how do we work with people like UPS and partner to grow, and I think it just sort of hit me. I mean, if there's anything among this whole group, it's sort of the granularity. Drone's going to take one item wherever it goes. I mean, the fact that y'all are breaking down pallets into single things to get out there, people want that, and the Internet of Things is all different devices that can do stuff. So the answer is sure. I mean, they won't care. So when we were first talking with UPS about doing an investment, this story came up, this use case. So they're like, yeah, this guy walks into a UPS store with a 6-foot bird cage. It almost sounds like the beginning of a joke, like a rabbi, a priest, and a cowboy walk into a UPS store with a 6-foot bird cage and wants to ship it. And they're like, well, we got to wrap it up, we got to put all this packaging, we got to palletize it, we've got to do all this stuff that's going to cost so much more than the bird cage is actually worth. And what you really needed is a dude with a pickup truck and bungee cords. So there's a lot of service options that don't exist right now that capacity going there anyway can handle on a granular basis. If you need to get something from here to Montgomery, Alabama in the next 4 hours, I don't know of a service option that necessarily does that regularly, but I guarantee you somebody's getting on 85 right now and heading in that direction. So absolutely. So you can see that for sort of the longer distance sort of courier thing, and the oversized out of the box kind of items like that, like that, I think I mentioned before, like that heirloom crib that you want to send to your sister. It might not need to be there tomorrow. It certainly needs to be there before the baby gets there, but packaging it up would be awfully expensive. And do you really want it to bounce through 4 trucks in an airplane before it gets there? Or do you want to safely set it in the back of my SUV and I just take it there because I'm going there anyway?
Good, thank you. Great. So I'm going to ask a question around. Where do you guys see the biggest barriers to moving forward with these technologies? Just think generically, not specifically your companies, but how do we go to the next level with, given where you've come from? Who wants to take that?
I can start. I think, from what I've seen experience-wise is just the cost of entry and looking at, what are going to be the, expenses associated with, coupling together a solution that, again, and looking at the ROI of that to drive out, perhaps costs, associated with manual processes that my company may be leveraging today. My response to that would be, as this, concept of connected devices has grown, the barrier to entry has gone down. I mean, the cost of devices have continually decreased. The modules in the devices that are part of the components that make up the devices have steadily declined. So I think that is where I've seen most, recent times is maybe that first, along with just general knowledge and education of what, how an IoT strategy can, implement it and how it can help my business. But I think the first of that would have been cost, but that's continually to go down as this concept continues to grow out in the business sector.
And so I'd say, it's no different than the old adage that we used to say, like buying computers, right? Is that no one ever got fired for buying IBM. And that's kind of how it is, right? So it's, well, gosh, we've never tried this before. Is this a good idea? Like, what really happens? Why can't I just go get a lease, right? So that's the pushback that we end up getting. And so for us, that's just a function of time, right? Like, we now have a variety of customers who you would all know and recognize who took us a while to get them over that initial hump. And then after that, they keep coming back, right? Because of the flexibility that we can offer. And I think it's probably no different for anybody else, right? It's like, hey, can we really trust Marc to get this product there? And then they answer that question.
Everybody gets fired for hiring Roadie at this point.
But probably not 6 months from now, right?
No.
So they'll get product there, and then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier. So I think this isn't a function of, like, is the technology there? Are the people good enough? Do people not understand it? It's just a function of time, right? So, going back to the Airbnb analogy, you can look through all their data from like 2008, 2009, and like no one wanted to stay on anybody else's couch until someone did, right? And then all of a sudden, now they're a huge company that we all know about. So I don't think there's any like foundational, functional problem here. It's just time.
So with drones, we've already talked a lot about the regulatory hurdles, but another major hurdle, especially when you talk about companies, non-drone companies, implementing the technology to improve their bottom line, which is what everybody wants to do. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Everybody wants to use a drone for something. And what we've seen happen a lot, especially with companies who don't have a lot of experience with the technology, is they buy into the hype. So they'll say, I want to use a drone for this or this and that. And they'll have hordes of people come to them with all types of marketing and sales pitches and all this type of thing. And at the end of the day, they'll run a pilot program, and it'll turn out that they bought into something that wasn't really what they said it was going to be. There's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of vaporware out there. There's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of people overselling things, telling people that drones will do things that they just won't do, at least at this point in time. So if you're a company and you're looking at integrating drone technology into your lines of business, you just have to be careful not to to buy into the hype and really evaluate what you're looking to do and the platforms and the vehicles and the technologies that you're wanting to do those jobs with, and make sure that before you spend a whole lot of money that those technologies are going to do what the manufacturer said they were going to do.
I think Brad's absolutely right. I mean, you have to get other people buying in. That's one of the great things about having UPS on board helping us, and also, Delta. I mean, we're delivering bags from a few different airports around the country, natural flows of where people are going from airports out to take those bags that were already there anyway. And a lot of other flows that you sort of figure out. People die, get married, get divorced, have kids. There's all sorts of things. There's Coachella. We had delivery happen yesterday because someone was heading down that way. It's a natural flow during football season, understanding those. But the biggest hurdle is this, and this will be the audience participation part. Who's heard of Roadie before right now? Okay, so you leave your hands up. No, this is still the audience participation part. What would it take for you to tell the rest of the people in here about it? Because that's how you build. That's our challenge, is building that community. And getting everybody in that community, it just gets stronger and stronger. It's literally trying to build, eBay, UPS, and Airbnb swirled together in a cup. It's much more like that than it is like Uber. So it's how do you get people engaged and wanting to help people out and having lots of use cases and thinking about it when they're thinking about shipping or sending, which feels a little different, something they've done all the same way for an awfully long time, something they don't really care about, something they don't want to deal with, and show them how it could be more delightful, cheaper, and friendlier. So our part is just bringing in the community, and it's a marketplace effort. We have to bring in both sides and do it in the right balance, or it gets sort of out of whack.
Good. I think we got less than a minute left, so what I'm going to do is just ask you guys, seeing as we're looking at technology for next year, what you all think is the next big thing that we'll be talking about next year at the summit?
I would have to go with, and it may be discussed in other sessions already, but I think you'll start to see a little bit more growth around augmented and virtual reality and leveraging those technologies within the warehouse and those sort of operations are out in the actual, say for example, the oil fields or wherever the operational sites and job sites are located, and leveraging that type of technology for a more efficient.
It's a really good question. It's hard to answer. So I would say it's less about a technology and more about a pragmatic approach to how you run your business. And so I would say, collaborative logistics is what we participate in, and I think everybody has participated in some function or another for long periods of time. And I think we're kind of now at that tipping point where the tools and technologies are there, the companies are there to help you with it. So we're now at that tipping point where people can finally get the ball rolling and really take advantage of everything that's out there.
I think one of the big things that's starting to really pick up is autonomous cars, and probably more relevant to logistics and drones, at least at this point in time. So I think, they're selling cars now that you can buy that are fully autonomous, that drive themselves. And I think with logistics, it's going to be a big deal to get driverless delivery trucks and all that type of thing.
I'll steal Lola Ryan's answer. I think collaborative delivery is going to be big, with people starting to work more with one another. I also think there's going to be a comeuppance to some degree to people in my own space. You can't deliver stuff for $1. You just can't do it. And I think you're going to wind up seeing a lot of apps that are couriers with apps slapped on the front of them. Some of that magic start to wear off. One of the reasons that we try to stay where the math has always just got to work. I mean, we're lucky we don't have the same, I don't have to change oil, I don't have to change windshield wipers and all that, but all these things where you have sort of paid workforces and you've got to do it, I mean, there's a point at which it works until it breaks, and I think you'll probably see a few break.
Yeah, I think there's so many layers. There's a technology, and then there's all this social network expectation that's driving a lot of this.
And logistics is hard. I mean, when Uber drives a person and they hop out of a car, it's a package with legs, and they walk off. You don't have to take it anywhere, make sure it shows up, in the same condition it got there. They just leave. With logistics, whether it's pallets or otherwise, you need to make sure that stuff is in the same conditions, which is why you have security measures, why you're breaking stuff down, making sure everything is right where it is. So.
Great. So with that, I want to thank everyone for a great session here. Thank you.